Chairman, Vice Chairman, distinguished members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you and provide testimony regarding HB 597. Let me just start by saying I have no problem waiting from last night until this morning. I appreciate the time you're putting into this. The fact is, you're putting time in thinking about not only the testimony you're hearing this week, but also hearing from folks who are going to be presenting very different arguments. This is what this whole thing is about. I'm a researcher at base. I'm confident in our arguments, and I think you can weigh the evidence. You'll come out on the right side of this issue. Again, my name is Jim Stergios. I run the Boston-based think tank Pioneer Institute. In our 25-year history, the Institute's been associated with most of the effective reforms in Massachusetts. The key reforms in Massachusetts from being somewhere around 12th in the country to being number 1 in the country in educational attainments on all subjects tested in sample tests that are called the National Assessment of Education Progress. We are also, and this is important to remember, we are also in the top 6 countries in math and science when you look at the trends in math and science study and the PISA tests. Not where we were when we started on our series of reforms. This is one way of saying to you very clearly, the Massachusetts standards do matter a lot. Senator Stotsky talked about some other associated reforms that could really propel Ohio students to higher achievement, to international competitiveness that Common Core doesn't even begin to fight. Our reforms were not all school choice. They were about the public system in terms of the traditional district system and school choice. They were really focused on 2 things: giving parents more choice on one side, and then the quality of the teacher interaction with students. And that teacher interaction with students was primarily based upon what Sandy was talking about last night, really high standards, world-class standards, but then a certification process for teachers that made sure those teachers could teach to those high standards. Those 2 elements are crucial if you want to move forward. So one of the things I would urge you in looking at the bill is making sure, as you think this through, there's also some consideration to the teacher certification process. Look, I'd say a couple things. Sometimes people talk about Common Core opposition as being politically motivated. It's the furthest thing from my mind, and let me tell you why. Our Massachusetts reforms were crafted in a bipartisan manner. If you look at most education reforms around the country, for example in Florida, they were driven by one party. And when the other party comes to power, what happens is they undo those reforms, and there's no longevity to it. Bill Weld, Republican governor, and Tom Birmingham, the Senate president in the 90s, Democrat, and frankly a Democrat who was much further to the left than probably your Democrats here in terms of spending, school spending and things like that. I stand by my comment. I've done my research. They came together and drafted an incredibly powerful bill that took a look at the complexities of reforming our education system. There was really not much ideology there. So I come to you saying, what we look at as effective reform is not a partisan question. It's about how do you make sure you really aim for high goals? How do you test to those goals? How do you make sure that your human capital can actually teach to those goals? And then give parents more choices. In my testimony today, I'd like to build on what Mike Donnelly was just talking about a little bit before, and that is HB 597. What's actually really positive in that? As I take it, you're repealing and replacing the ELA and math standards that come from Common Core. You're also repealing the next generation science standards. You are putting in place for a couple of years some Massachusetts standards as sort of the foundation from which to work to improve upon those standards. And let me tell you something. Those standards can be improved upon, and you should. You should not take Massachusetts standards cold cloth. You should make them your own, given your own industries and your own interests. There's a prohibition of PARC. I'll talk quite a bit about why that's really important. And then there's this thing called the process for sort of the legal adoption of new standards, and that is crucial. And it gets to the whole question of how do you really develop state-led standards, and why is that important? Why this kind of fetish about state-led? Well, there are really good reasons for that. Now, so let me go to this issue of state-led to start, if that's okay. I mean, I think when you think about setting up an appropriate mechanism for reviewing your standards as you develop, after you develop them, making sure they're really high quality, you know, obviously there's an accountability piece. Let's make sure they're really high quality standards, truly high quality. But there is a lot more to that. Instead of talking about sort of the secrecy, the confidentiality agreements that we heard about yesterday that surrounded Common Core to some degree, let me tell you why it's really important for you to have a truly public process here in Ohio. So if you think about the development of standards in most states, I want to give you an example from Massachusetts in 1990, the 1990s and 2000, we were developing our standards. It included things like developing drafts after extensive parent, teacher, scholarly, and business input. Included extensive public comment periods upon those drafts, public hearings, extensive revisions, which are again put out for public comment. This is completely different from Common Core. Why is it important? Because we were trying to do really hard things. We actually debated the math wars in the late 1990s in Massachusetts and won that because we were able to convince over a period of time the teachers especially that it was important to move in a much higher direction in terms of our goals. If you don't get buy-in from the teachers, at the classroom level, they will not have the passion, they will not be convinced, they will not have the conviction to actually implement high standards. You can put it on a piece of paper, but if you don't get the kind of buy-in, the participation of teachers, you will not see the kind of progress you really need to see. Same thing is true of parents. Why do you think that we're having this debate so many years afterwards, after the adoption? There was no parental involvement. Most states, including Massachusetts, which adopted Common Core, did so in the dead of summer, in July. We actually more or less adopted in January of 2010, saying that we intended to. We adopted on paper in June, right after the Common Core, June 2010, right after Common Core was essentially finalized. But the rubber stamp came August 2nd, 2010. No one is around. That's not parent involvement. And again, what Mike was just talking about a second ago in terms of making sure parents are involved and feel comfortable with this, that is crucial in order for them to say, I'm not going to just complain about something, I will support my kids' involvement with a set of expectations. No kind of settlement around these questions for teachers or parents is possible with Common Core because they were not involved. Now, I hear many times Sue Pimentel, who's one of the lead authors on the English language arts side for the Common Core, say, oh, lots of parents were involved, lots of teachers were involved. I've talked in lots and lots of states about Common Core. I always make a point of going up to a teacher's representative and saying, who represented the teachers in the development of Common Core? And most often what I get is between 2 and 6 or 7 teachers. Having 2 or several teachers go and participate in meetings in Washington, D.C., in one of the organizations that holds the copyright on Common Core is not a truly state-led process. In fact, if you go back and I look at Massachusetts, we had thousands of teachers who provided comments. That's real teacher involvement. And I said that anybody who thinks that having a few education bureaucrats, let's say the commissioner or the deputy commissioner, participate in these meetings and calling that state-led, doesn't truly value a state-led process. If that's their sense of a process that upholds the public trust, I don't think they understand what a representative democracy is. So it is important to get that public adoption process right in order to engage people, but also because of legal, and I sincerely mean legal questions. Proponents of Common Core say that it is aligned with our federalist traditions, and I know there are lots of people talking about constitutionality of federal government involvement in education. I'm not talking about that. Those are broader questions that go beyond my epaulets. I don't know constitutional law. But we have hired the two top legal representatives of the United States Department of Education, the General Counsel, Kent Talbert, and the Deputy General Counsel, Robert Eitel, who served in the United States Department of Education. Take a look at the legal dimensions of Common Core. Let's look at the laws.